the Super Bowl, and American football with Charlotte Henry. This is MacVoices. Today's edition of MacVoices is supported by Kolide. Kolide is a fleet visibility solution for Mac, Windows, and Linux that can help you securely scale your business. Learn more at kolide.com/MacVoices. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, today we're going to talk about Apple, we're going to talk about Apple Music, and we're going to talk about football and the collision of those three with the news that Apple has secured the rights to the Super Bowl halftime show. I couldn't think of anybody better to talk about it than my favorite football friend. That's a different kind of football, Charlotte Henry.
Yeah, remind me, we're talking about your football, right? The throwing one, not the feet one.
Exactly. Oh, well,
right, got it.
The feet are involved moving it around, but yeah, you're exactly right. Good to see you, Charlotte. How are you?
So good to see you, Chuck. I'm all right.
So I wanted to get you on about this, and we've been fighting our schedules a little bit, but this is a pretty big deal, I think, in a lot of ways that are obvious, because it puts Apple Music out there right in front of arguably the biggest TV event, at least here in the U.S., of the year. But it also, you have to wonder about what the behind the scenes aspects of this are for some of Apple's other ambitions. And so I wanted to see what your thoughts were on this.
Yeah, so I think you're right on both counts. By definition, the combination of Apple and Apple Music, which is a big deal, and the NFL and the Super Bowl, which are big deals, coming together for a multi-year agreement on the NFL halftime show, which even people who don't like the NFL care about and will watch clips of, is obviously a big, huge thing. You know, Apple has obviously done different sponsorships and has done all sorts of events before, but this is the NFL halftime show is basically on a different scale to anything, isn't it? And when you put the might of Apple behind something like that, we're talking serious stuff here. I appreciate that, there was no small fry when Pepsi was doing the halftime show for all those years, but Apple Music is quite clever that it's not Apple as a whole. Obviously, the halftime show is about music and music performers. So having the streaming service be a big, be the headline sponsor of it is quite clever as well. It's not Apple as a whole. So that's kind of interesting. I'd have loved to see the reaction in Spotify HQ when this deal was announced. That might have been quite interesting. But I kind of like it. Obviously you're always going to have access to the biggest names in the music business if you're the NFL halftime show. Apple Music already has access to the biggest names in the music business. We see that on, through its radio offerings and interviews and whatever the whole time. So yeah, this is, I think, going to be really quite something to see, actually. And I think it's really interesting that Apple wants to get involved. We know Apple is interested in purchasing the rights to broadcast the NFL Sunday Ticket, which now, I find this hard to get my head around because of where I live. But Sunday Ticket is out of market games, right? That's the games if you're living in New York, you can't watch the New York Giants, stream the New York Giants. You have to watch it on whatever your TV service is, right?
That's my understanding, but I'm not that much into the blackout questions and all that of football.
Right. And I think the NFL ticket gives you access to sort of everything. So it's a big, and NFL fans will know, NFL fans living in the US will know better than us perhaps, but that would be a big deal for Apple just to get, it would mark it out as a serious player in the sports game. So far we've had MLB games on, Friday Night Baseball on there, which is, no small thing. But as I understand it, the NFL is, whatever measurement you use, on a different scale. So if Apple could secure the rights and be the home to some NFL games via the Sunday Ticket, that would be a huge moment in its development as a media company, as opposed to the kind of software and hardware company we were used to. And I wonder if being part of the Super Bowl is a kind of part of its bid to outflank Amazon and Google and others to get those rights.
It certainly, I guess from where I sit, it would certainly improve Apple's place at the table. I mean, look, at the end of the day, it's probably all going to be about money and about viewers. But it feels like Apple is in a great position here because of all its other assets and resources and channels and all those things. Cross promotion to drive that. One statistic I saw that was very interesting. As we record this, just last Thursday, the very first Thursday night game was on Amazon Prime. And apparently, according to the article I read, that it was the largest Amazon Prime subscription, Amazon Prime, the TV part, the largest 3-hour subscription drive that they've ever had.
Right,
to watch
interesting.
That. So, you have to wonder about that. I mean, I understand that the Super Bowl is going to be the halftime show is broadcast, not strictly on Apple TV. But if Apple were to be able to secure NFL ticket, then how much more is that going to do in terms of Apple TV subscriptions?
Yeah, and I suspect just from the Super Bowl thing, you mentioned the cross-channel promotion capabilities. You can certainly see a situation whereby you can view the whole halftime show if you're an Apple Music subscriber within Apple Music. I think already we're starting to see them make NFL playlists and stuff within Apple Music. So the infrastructure for cross-channel promotion is there already, as it has been throughout, as Apple's developed TV Plus TV shows and movies, as it's moved into other areas. Like that stuff's been there already, and it's just going to be on steroids with the Super, when it's the Super Bowl.
You said Apple as a media company earlier, and of course we've all known as a media company. That's what your podcast, The Edition, is all about. And yet sometimes I confess I kind of forget that they're a media company.
I think we all
sense.
do. I don't think you're alone in that. And I think I was discussing this on a recent edition of the Edition podcast. There was a bit of a meltdown in New York when Aaron Judge was chasing 61, 62 home runs, and the Friday night game against the Red Sox, where they thought it might happen, was on Apple TV Plus. Was Apple TV? It's not Plus. MLB is all free via Apple TV. And there are apparently negotiations with the Yes Network, which is the New York Yankees kind of entertainment service that normally shows their games, to try and reclaim the rights to that game, so their commentators would call what they hoped would be those big moments. Now, it didn't happen, but the thing that's significant is Apple stood firm, and it was like, no, we've got these rights. This is our game. We're taking this seriously. Like it is a media company now, and sport, as we know, for any media company, is a huge, huge deal. It's the thing that is basically keeping cable TV alive. It's the thing that's keeping traditional TV packages alive, is the ability to watch live sport. So no wonder the up and coming streaming services want to get involved in some of the biggest events and moments.
So let's say we have Amazon doing Thursday night, ESPN, which is not a streaming service, but they have secured Monday Night Football.
Okay.
Sunday night is still broadcast. But what are the implications of some of these channels, some of these sports moving to the streaming services and off of broadcast TV, even partially?
Well, I think you answered that question when you gave that stat about the Amazon Prime Video subscription take-up.
Okay. But
I think it just surely drives subscriptions. But all I will say, though, just on that, that Aaron Judge moment I was talking about, there was a kind of backlash that it wouldn't be everywhere and you couldn't watch it. It would be harder to say watch it in a bar in New York if it happened, and those kind of things. But we sort of are not living in that era anymore. These streaming services, these tech companies, are the ones with the money. I can understand why traditional broadcasters of all flavors want to hold on to those rights, because they're in most cases the biggest draw to them. But you're competing with Silicon Valley money. That's quite hard to do.
Well, you touched on part of it that I was thinking. So many of these things up to this point in time, well, maybe not quite exactly this point, but until relatively recently, have been sort of a right almost that people see. I've got a right to see my games, and then the
Mm,
blackouts started because the team owners wanted to sell tickets locally, and if
sure.
people could watch it on TV, then they wouldn't come to the game. So that was the first erosion, I guess, of that right. And now we're seeing potentially, and then ESPN
Mm.
went, and took Monday Night Football, and so you lost that, and so there's yet another erosion of this perceived right. And I just wonder, whoever wins the NFL ticket battle, if it's a streaming service, could that backfire and be viewed as yet another erosion of that right?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think we touched on this before when I've been on your show. There's equivalent things here in the UK. So, for example, you're not allowed to show any football, our football, soccer, broadcast any football matches at all on a Saturday between 2:45 p.m. and 5:15 p.m. It's just not allowed. And a large part of that is to drive people to buy tickets both to the big Premier League teams and to smaller local clubs and support those teams, so that they don't get tempted just to stay inside and watch maybe a bigger game that's taking place at that point. I personally think it just leads to piracy and streaming and, people finding other ways to watch the thing they want to watch and no one making any money from it. But that's a different conversation. We also have a thing called the crown jewels here, which is there are certain key events that absolutely have to be shown on what we call terrestrial TV. So basically channels 1 to 5. So the BBC, ITV, Channel 4 and Channel 5, although that's not really part of this conversation. So we have a similar thing here. There are key moments that have to be shown, sports moments that have to be available to everyone. But everything else, it's just kind of who wants to pay for it and how much are they willing to pay for it. And, if it means the rest of us have to take out an extra subscription service or an extra TV package, that's kind of how it goes. But yeah, there's a very strong argument. It's not always the fans that do best about it. Although in the case of our football here, you can argue that much more money has come into the game here, which has had some benefits for fans, nicer stadiums to go to in some cases and better players being paid to come here. So you get to see better games, all of that kind of stuff. It's, less tangible things, but it's not like there's a shortage of money in the NFL, is there already? So
No, that puts it mildly. I don't know. I thought this was a really, really interesting development. But I want to circle back to the music aspect of this, because you're right. If you're the NFL halftime show, you can access pretty much anybody. So how is this going to affect, you think, the selection of the artist and the presentation by that artist or artists? Last year, there was an awful lot of controversy about the halftime show and the fact that it seemed to focus so much on the hip hop community. And so, what are we going to see this year? Do you want to make any predictions?
Well, we know we were seeing Rihanna. She's announced she's part of the halftime show. That's so I don't know if we'll get any other artists, but we know Rihanna is the kind of headline, the first act we know. I rather enjoyed I was really enjoying the hip hop halftime show. I stayed up to watch it. I then realized, I did that thing of going, oh, it's so good. They're finally not just doing old people music. They're doing people's music that's for me. And then realized what had happened, that I'm now the old people. So that was quite a moment. But yeah, I didn't understand the controversy around that show. I thought it was great fun. But yeah, look, Apple is a big supporter of all sorts of music. It's a big supporter of hip hop. It's a big supporter, with Zane Lowe, often is pushing those kind of artists forward on his show. And I'll be interested to see what role he actually has in this as, kind of the figurehead of Apple Music. That's going to be very interesting to see. So yeah, we know we're seeing Rihanna. I wonder if we'll see other kind of R&B and hip hop artists, doing cameos and performing with her, which would be great. Yeah, and I think basically they can sort of have whoever they want, really, can't they? Who wouldn't want to be part of the Apple Music halftime show? I assume money's not going to be any object in either the budget for the show or paying for the artist. So
Today's edition of Mac Voices is supported by Kolide. Kolide is a fleet visibility solution for Mac, Windows, and Linux that can help you securely scale your business. The challenge with endpoint security has always been that it's difficult to scale, and when remote work took over, that challenge got exponentially harder. You need visibility into your fleet of devices in order to meet security goals and reduce service desk tickets. But how do you get that visibility when different parts of your company run on Mac, Windows, and Linux? You get Kolide. Kolide is an endpoint security solution that gives IT teams a single dashboard for all devices, regardless of their operating system. Kolide gives you real-time access to your fleet's data and can do things that traditional MDMs can't. And instead of installing intrusive agents or locking down devices, Kolide takes a user-focused approach that communicates security recommendations to your employees directly on Slack. You can answer every question you have about your fleet without intruding on your workforce. Visit kolide.com/MacVoices to find out how. If you follow that link, they'll hook you up with a goodie bag just for activating a free trial. That's Kolide, KOLIDE.com/MacVoices. Again, Kolide.com/MacVoices. Thanks to Kolide for their support of Mac Voices. To go back to last year's halftime show, I mean, my Twitter feed was as divided as I've ever seen it. Probably more so than with politics. It was either the best halftime show ever or the worst halftime show ever, and there was nobody in between.
I suggest there was some demographic, division there.
There to some degree, but not as much as you might think. I was surprised
the fact that was even a conversation, right, shows what a big thing Apple Music is getting into.
Yes, great point.
The fact that was, even I, from this side of the pond, understand that the things that are a big deal in the Super Bowl, even if you don't care about the football, is the adverts and who's going to appear in the adverts and who performs at the halftime show. Like, people who haven't watched a single NFL game for the rest of the season watch those two things, right? So Apple Music, and we know Apple kind of tries to stay away from controversy wherever it can, and tries, has got itself into a very, very public, controversial thing. Had Apple Music been sponsoring that show last year, maybe some of that ire that you saw on your Twitter feed would have been directed at Apple Music as well. I'm never sure how comfortable Apple is with public criticism, but anyway, that will be interesting to see how much, what Apple branding are we going to see on this show? Is it we're going to see Apple Music branding on the stage and all of that kind of stuff? All of that's going to be, we're 6 months or whatever away from it. It's going to be so interesting to see how that plays out.
I have a hard time visualizing, like, the artist, whoever she, he, they are, appearing on like an Apple-shaped stage. I think that's, Apple usually is a lot more subtle than that.
I'm picturing a white stage and an Apple Music logo, but I suspect you're right, and it's going to be a lot more subtle.
Yeah, I think there's a place for it. Honestly, I would have to go back and watch the last few halftime shows to see if there were any Pepsi logos other than, in the intros or whatever. And that may be part of the whole deal, that the NFL doesn't want it to be just completely corporate branding. That they want it's corporate supported but not branded.
Sure, but if you're Apple, you need to be getting something out of it, right? I assume we don't know the numbers, but we can imagine they're fairly hefty. And Apple Music will be wanting something from that.
Yeah.
Whether it's Zalo comparing to branding somewhere to whatever. They didn't do this as an act of charity, did they?
No, and we can sit here and riff all day on ideas. That suddenly do you have NFL players promoting AirPods Pro, or getting rid of those?
Plenty of them promote Beats products either deliberately or inadvertently, don't they?
Exactly. And do we finally get rid of those nasty little Surface devices and see some MacBook Pros, on the sidelines?
Or the iPad Pro. Yes. Well, I assume that's a separate deal altogether.
I would think so. But again,
Because this
if you're
deal is very specifically about that, whatever, 10, 12, 15 minutes at half time, isn't it?
right, but if your foot's in the door, and
Well, and I think
now,
that's the key point. It's
yeah,
about Apple getting its foot in the door with the NFL. I think that's exactly everything we've touched on is about that. It's about Apple getting its foot in the door of this mega, mega sporting brand, and the different franchises, the and the greatest show on earth, the biggest show on earth, isn't it? They call the Super Bowl. And so yeah, that's what it's all about to me for Apple. That's why I mentioned the Sunday ticket. That's why you wonder what this kind of corporate sponsorship things will be. It's all about Apple getting its way into the NFL, both as a corporate thing and also being taken seriously as a media company involved in sports.
and we both know that Apple has a tendency to play the long game in anything. They don't just jump in and flash the cash and take over. That's what I love about them. There's a bit more subtlety to it, and there's a much longer term plan that you and I are not, unfortunately, we're not party to. So
no, as I always say, if anyone wants to drop me an email and tell me the long term plan, really happy to hear it and write about it. But I think, well, some people call it subtlety, some people call it caution. We see this quite a lot with Apple in, whether it's a software release or its move into the media game. And I think that's happened in sports. In a way, I'm slightly surprised how quickly they got into sport at all. And quite how quickly they got into sport with its own original commentators and presenters. The MLB Friday Night Baseball production is all Apple's own commentators and production and whatever else. So we're obviously not going to see that in the NFL anytime soon, including with this halftime show. But your point is the right one. It's about getting your foot in the door, and you can so see at some point. Maybe we'll see, instead of Amazon Thursday Night Football, Apple Thursday Night Football. Or it will just, or Amazon gets Thursday Night Football, Apple gets Sunday Ticket. All the fans are annoyed because they have to have multiple subscriptions. I think we can see that outcome as well. And, putting on a good halftime show maybe won't compensate for that.
Charlotte, do you think there's any chance we might see split sponsorships? Like I'm thinking Sunday Night Football, and NBC does Sunday Night Football here. So could we see Sunday Night Football brought to you by Apple Music or just by Apple, and one other key sponsor?
I mean, I'd love. Who knows? There's obviously Apple obviously has money it is prepared to put into sports sponsorship of various kinds. So that's entirely plausible. I suspect it's keener to have the rights than to support someone else having the rights. Would be my guess. If it's going to spend the money, I suspect it would rather spend the money on having the rights themselves and getting people into the TV app and maybe getting them to have TV Plus subscriptions than giving money to NBC. Would be my guess.
Okay, that makes a certain amount of sense. The other thing, though, and you mentioned it sort of in a sideways way pre-show before we started recording. Do you think that would make sense, or do you think we would see potentially an Apple Sports channel?
Yeah, this is the really interesting question. We've seen a lot of the other streaming services hiking up their price, whether, in various ways, ad tiers, non-ad supported tiers, just general price, basic price rises, whatever. Well, we've seen that happening with basically every other streaming service, haven't we? Or certainly anyone that Apple TV Plus cares to compete with. So I think this could go two ways. You could have an Apple TV Plus sports tier where you pay a bit extra and you get access to the baseball, the NFL. And remember, Apple has signed a 10-year deal with Major League Soccer. some games it said will be free to everyone through the TV app. Some games you'll have to have a TV Plus subscription. So I think my guess will be it will start putting, kind of, for want of a better phrase, paywalling some games of whatever sports it has the right to. So for some games, you will need to have a TV Plus subscription. For some, you won't. That's what it's going to do with the MLS. I think it will start doing it with MLB from next season. It wouldn't surprise me if they try and do that with Sunday Night Football. But you could equally see a thing where you just need to buy an added tier to get Sunday Night Football.
And I know
or you can equally imagine, can't you, Tim Cook, who we know is a big sports fan, a big football fan, coming out on stage at an Apple event and going, "We've got Sunday Ticket. We're going to make it available for all TV Plus subscribers. Asterisk, TV Plus now costs $9.99 a month."
Or we're going to make it free for the first year.
What all the games Sunday? Yes.
I mean, pick your variation, but yeah, I think
yes.
You're right.
But of course, pick your variation adds to a very un-Apple thing, doesn't it? It's always wanted, simplicity and consistency across TV Plus. You and I both have access to the same shows. There's no territorial issues because they're all originals. Apple TV Plus shows are Apple TV Plus shows, and that's it. With sport, they've done that so far, but it's the first place where you could see some divergence, where you have add-ons instead of, everything is the same for everyone.
Well, that's why I couch my question as an Apple TV Plus.
Go on, say it, Chuck. Say it, Chuck.
Channel. Okay, so I have Apple TV Plus, entertainment, and Apple TV Plus sports.
And both cost what, $12.99 a month?
Well, or not. I mean, maybe if you split it out that way. If right now, I think it's fair to assume that Apple TV Plus, as it exists today, is supporting itself financially. So,
do we know that?
Well, we don't know that for sure, but it seems like it's either Apple again playing a really long game and investing a whole lot of money, or it's pretty close to it.
My assumption is it's always been happy to pay a lot up front to have famous people on big budget shows. And it didn't care if it took some undefined, number of years that they know, but we obviously don't, to make a profit. Remember, no one basically paid for it for the first year at all. It came if you bought an iPhone or a Mac.
Right.
So we're in the first year of some people having to pay for it, and they've reduced the free trial period as well.
Okay. That's a fair point. I don't know. I mean, because I know that even though we're getting the streaming services, we're still having some of the same problems. That the streaming services want to bundle channels together, and you end up having something that looks like what I used to pay a cable company for, a ridiculous amount of money paying for channels I don't want. And I'm still a fan of saying I would like to, okay, you want to make me buy 5 channels? I have no problem with that, but let me pick the 5. Don't you pick the 5?
Yeah. Well, let's look to the Apple One bundle for a moment. Apple picks the services that are included in each tier. And News Plus is in the top tier. Are they going to do an Apple One Premier Sports package and that costs a bit more? And if you take that out, you get Apple TV Plus, Apple News Plus, and including Apple Sports. It would be a big driver to there are lots of ways it could play this. I suspect the thing we see first is not going to be how it ends up. Also, let's be clear, this is all predicated on Apple winning the rights to NFL Sunday Ticket.
Yes.
Although, I mean, I say that, but also it's already got other sports rights and clearly wants to build more. So, whether this happens in a year or two, there's obviously some drive to get sports in there. And of course, we should keep reiterating that the halftime show at the Super Bowl is Apple Music. It's got nothing to do with Apple TV Plus or the TV app. Although, I mean, you and I suspect it will in some way, but it's Apple Music is the sponsor. So again, presumably the ultimate aim of Apple doing this is to drive people to subscribe to Apple Music. And it's not going to be showing sports clips in Apple Music,
No, I agree. Although, you can't help but wonder. Then, does Apple have special supplemental programming after the halftime, or pardon me, after the Super Bowl?
We've not been told that. All we know is there's a multi-year deal to sponsor the halftime show. I assume as part of that there will be, as I've mentioned, we've already seen playlists and stuff. I assume there will be a big Apple Music, radio interviews with the artists performing. I am sure we will be able to, people who subscribe for Apple Music will be able to watch the halftime show within Apple Music app, either live or on replay or both. I'm sure all of those things must be part of the deal. How could Apple not have negotiated at least some of those things?
And how could the NFL object to it? I mean, if it's more exposure for their events. So
right, it's a partnership. So
yeah, it's fun to speculate on. I mean, it's very early days for this particular deal, and we're just. Let's see. This is end of September, so we have October, November, December, January, before.
I said 6, but it's really 4.
Yeah. So I don't know. But I admit, the more we talk about it, Charlotte, the more I realize that once again, I'm having trouble thinking in terms of Apple as just a media company. You're a lot better at that than I am.
Well, I think the power of it is that it's not just a media company, but is now a media company as well as all the other things we know of Apple. And that gives it huge, almost endless possibilities of what it can do with these type of things.
Yeah. Hey, it'll be fun to watch.
Yeah, it will be.
Fun to watch. Not just the halftime show, but the game as well.
Well, yes. I tend to have to fall asleep by halftime because it gets quite late for me. If you think of the timing.
Well,
I often make it to the halftime show and then have to watch the second half, maybe the morning afterwards.
All right. Well, we may do a morning after the Super Bowl discussion of the halftime show right here with Charlotte. That would be fun. So the edition is rolling along, both the podcast and the newsletter. Anything that we need to specifically talk about there for what you're doing?
Just more the merrier. Come sign up either for free or take out a paid subscription to the newsletter to help support the work I'm doing. It looks not just at Apple as a media company, though there's been quite a lot of focus on that recently because there's a huge amount of news, including the story we've been discussing. But like the digital media and media industry more broadly, try and publish 2 newsletters and 1 podcast a week. So quite a lot of work going into it. So I hope people can, take out a paid subscription or even a free subscription helps. I love having you all there. So come join me over at theedition.substack.com. That's edition with an A-double-D. And I'm at Charlotte A. Henry on Twitter, so you can find me there too.
And absolutely pay attention to the podcast. Charlotte has a lot of great guests and will help you think a little more about Apple as a media company, or at least as partially a media company. Charlotte, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for the time.
Always fun to hang out. See you soon, I hope.
All right. Take care. Folks, this is Mac Voices. I'm Chuck Joyner. We will be back with more soon. Thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with Mac Voices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode.
you will join these fine people who help bring you Mac Voices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.